Katalis is a unique 5-year government-backed business development program that unlocks the vast potential of economic partnerships between Australia and Indonesia.
Public and market reactions surrounding Indonesian President Joko Widodo's meeting with Tesla CEO Elon Musk in Texas back in May was a taste of just how big the topic of battery investment is at the moment in Indonesia.
Dia sangat tertarik sekali untuk segera datang ke Indonesia, dan tadi saya sudah sampaikan untuk bisa datang di Indonesia.
Well, I'm very excited about the future of Indonesia, and I'm really fired up by people in Indonesia seem very optimistic and positive about the future, which is awesome. So I think Indonesia has tremendous potential, and I think we're going to look closely from a Tesla and SpaceX standpoint to try to do some partnerships in Indonesia.
That was Elon Musk and President Jokowi, taken from their press conference in May 2022. As Indonesia sets ambitious goals for its future as an electric vehicle manufacturing and exports hub and transitions into a decarbonised economy, there's a big push to attract investment in battery, something that's proving to be an attractive entryway for Australian investors. My name is Sondang Sirait, co-host of the Katalis podcast. In this episode, my co-host Rachel Mason Nunn and I will be chatting with Stuart Parry, Managing Director of the Queensland-based Energy Storage Industries Asia Pacific. We'll also be speaking with Marlistya Citraningrum, Program Manager for Sustainable Energy Access at the Institute for Essential Services Reform in Jakarta. Hi, Rachel. How are you?
Hi, Sondang. I'm good. How are you?
So let's get to it. Rachel, renewable energy is a priority for the Australian government. This is in line with the target to reduce carbon emissions. But just how fast are things developing there?
I guess it depends who you ask. Some Australians may say very fast and some may say not fast enough. But what's really clear over the last 12 months is that we have had a real policy shift here in Australia. There's recognition of the complexity of the energy challenges that we face and that it is a multi-pronged problem. States and territories and the federal government have made commitments towards a net zero target, but now those commitments need to be realised. And I think for Australians at the moment, we're coming out of winter and a lot of us have just received our energy bills from the winter. And I know for me personally, mine was double what it was at the same time last year. So we're definitely feeling the pinch and the impact of global events such as the war in Ukraine, which are pushing up our energy prices. And I think alongside that, there is recognition that renewables do present the best way to lower energy bills, a change that will really be felt at a household level and also reach those net zero commitments that our different governments have made here in Australia. But the amount of renewables that we need to get on the grid is completely unprecedented. We've never undergone an energy transition to this scale. So it's going to require a lot of planning and investment to get there. And hopefully we're taking some inspiration from Indonesia, who has certainly put renewable energy on the table during the recent G20 presidency.
That's true. Energy transition was certainly something we heard a lot throughout Indonesia's G20 presidency. There's certainly a lot of potential for clean investment, and there are talks of hundreds of thousands of new jobs being created as Indonesia transitions to net zero emission. And as you know, new and clean energy is also an area of partnership between Indonesia and Australia. This was among the topics of discussions when Prime Minister Albanese visited Jakarta in June 2022 to meet with President Jokowi, whereby, if you remember, both leaders agreed that we must bring about concrete progress.
Yeah, and renewable energy was definitely on the agenda at the Indos conference this year as well. So I think, in lots of platforms, we're hearing about the importance of renewable energy as an area of partnership for Australia and Indonesia. And it's exciting that Katalis is doing so much in this area too.
Yeah, so renewable energy is definitely in Katalis' portfolio. And one of the investments we've made is to support a market entry strategy for an Australian company to develop grid-scale renewable energy or battery manufacturing facility in Indonesia, and to partner with Indonesian suppliers and business consumers.
I will be speaking with the director of that company called Energy Storage Industries Asia Pacific, Stuart Parry, who was in Jakarta just recently. And you will be speaking with an Indonesian expert on the subject.
I will. I'm speaking with Marlistya Citraningrum, who is the Program Manager for Sustainable Energy Access at the Institute for Essential Services Reform in Jakarta. So we definitely have an interesting episode in store for you all today. So let's get to it.
Just recently, I caught up with Stuart Parry, Managing Director of Energy Storage Industries Asia Pacific, on his visit to Indonesia. Hi, Stuart. Welcome to the Katalis podcast.
Thanks very much for having me.
If you look around, this is a vast emerging economy. With your investor's hat on, what do you see?
I see a lot of energy. I see a lot of opportunity. In emerging economies such as this, we see a lot of development. We see a lot of people with lots of energy looking to try and do things and change things. As an investor, that's very exciting. Investment is made in times of expansion, exchange, and of change, which in the energy world, but definitely in at the moment. So therefore, I see that excitement, I see that opportunity in that. And as an investor, we're looking for expansion. We're looking for ways to improve our position, and I see Indonesia as a prime example for that, and has a very good investment thesis.
Yeah, so tell us about the battery technology that your company offers, and why is it relevant for Indonesia?
So we've partnered with the US company ESS Incorporated, which developed an iron flow battery. An iron flow battery is a redox flow battery. Instead of other batteries you see, they're more solid state, they're smaller, they're more compact. A flow battery moves electrolyte across a membrane. It's quite a simple process. Why is it relevant? It's relevant because what it can do is move large amounts of energy. It can firm the technology, confirm your energy use, And by firming, what I mean is it can soak up large amounts of energy during the day while the sun's shining, the wind is blowing, and then it can transfer that and dispatch that energy during the night time. And to have a truly firmed grid, or to have a truly renewable grid, if we are moving towards that net zero aim of most nations, you need large amounts of load shifting. It's one of the technologies that is relevant, and we say that it will be a patchwork of different technologies that will be used. And it will complement shorter duration technologies such as lithium-ion and longer duration technologies such as pumped hydro and gas peaking technologies. So it is a part of the solution. Why is it relevant? Also is important to look at the way it operates. Iron flow batteries like to operate at heat. The warmer they are, the better they operate. They don't degrade at heat, which is better for tropical countries. Also, it's quite sustainable, 100% recyclable, and it doesn't use any rare earth minerals. Now, that's advantageous because that decreases the cost. We use iron. Now, it's a plentiful access. It's also the electrolyte is a low acidity, so therefore it's non-toxic and non-flammable, which is an advantage, which allows it to be placed in residential areas at greater density compared to other technologies. Also, in remote and rural and isolated networks and areas, it's easy to be maintained and operated, and it can be maintained and operated by local people and trained. So it's that next facet of the energy transition, which is the transition of workers and ensuring that existing workers get transitioned across. This can employ other people. This is not a closed box per se.
So it is highly relevant, and the timing couldn't be better.
Yeah, it seems as such. I think Indonesia has great aspirations to decarbonising the grid. The president has talked about swapping out diesel gensets, and I think that's a wonderful start. I don't think an energy transition needs to happen a gradual and a conforming basis. If you move that up very quickly, then people just won't have energy. So therefore, these batteries are in the right place at the right time, we feel.
With Katalis support, you're looking to develop a large-scale storage battery manufacturing in Indonesia and tap into the supply chain. How is the partnership coming along?
Oh, very well. We're very, very impressed in working with Katalis and their partners. We're seeing a lot of movement very, very quickly. We understand that business environments can be challenging, can be different, especially with language barriers and things like that. And Katalis has really supported that. I think it will, from what I'm seeing, we are going to move a lot quicker into meeting the market's needs. That acceleration is quite welcome, and it will ensure that we can start to look to employ Indonesian workers earlier and quicker to support the energy transition. The reason behind this plan for the manufacturing here is that this is a product that can utilise existing equipment, existing skills and existing services. Pumps, pipes, electrical equipment, steel, tanks, they can all be manufactured here. There's great benefit to manufacturing inside a country and working with them. There's cost benefits as we're not transporting them around. Everyone's looking at Scope 2, Scope 3 emissions. Also, by building up that capability, we have the capability to support them. Everyone talks about, it's great to build the batteries, but who's going to look after them? I've heard stories of other battery types used as anchors as people didn't know how to look after them. We're building that capability inside the country. But that also economically can support the nation. If we're purchasing large amounts of equipment locally, that's going to build a battery supply chain for us. And I think what that does is leaves more money and creates greater sustainability of the product in the country. And that's where our plan is, and this is why Katalis is so important, because it's not just about speaking to off-takers, it's also about putting together our management and our executive team, and also understanding supply capability and developing that according to what we need. And realistically, electrical equipment, all the other equipment that we need, Indonesia already has that capability. It's just repurposing that towards and expanding that for our needs.
You're also looking to export clean storage battery from Indonesia to cater to regional markets. What do you think will be your unique selling point?
I think closest to market. I think Indonesia has a privileged position within Southeast Asia, the archipelago, and it's all the different areas we can place within the centre of this Southeast Asian market area. So therefore that again decreases on logistics. I think everyone's seen with COVID, supply chain barriers and constraints. What this will do is enable us to move quicker and react quicker. We can also then enables us to use Indonesia as a centre point to be able to provide support across the region. And I think that with a highly educated populace, that'll enable us to expand quicker and then provide that support network. And then also being a island archipelago, there are plenty of different port areas, so therefore we can utilise different parts of the nation as to support different areas. And I think that will again create greater efficiencies and make it more effective to be able to reach those different nations.
And just lastly, if you could tell us about your purchasing model.
So there's a lot of talk about the renewable energy and how you need $1 trillion a year and things like that. And it's very, very expensive for all countries. And we have two key barriers. We have technical and financial barriers. Technical barriers, we work with a world-famous reinsurance company to provide performance and product guarantees. So therefore, that gives people great comfort that these products, when they are installed, are going to work. The second one is the financial barriers. Matching revenues is very, very important. So therefore, the ability for us to provide a vendor finance model where customers can purchase the batteries and have them financed by ourselves, what that does is enables the uptake of the batteries quicker. There are also in certain areas opportunities to work with certain multilateral banks such as Asian Development Bank, World Bank, the DFAT and US government, for example, where they can provide credit support. And that aim is that allows us to provide a financial terms at a rate that means that we can provide cheaper energy, because in the end, the finance is the thing that could push up the cost. So therefore, by working with these multilaterals, what we're doing is enabling us to pass it on cheaper. Now, that can only be good for our end users. For them to be able to access cheap, reliable energy to improve education, health access and commerce, and also enable people to stay within their different areas, wherever they live, without having to come to central cities, is very, very important. And we see as one of the fundamental tenets is energy and communication to support that. So therefore, if we can provide a financial structure which enables all people equal access to electricity, what that means is that everyone can expand and everyone can improve their lives equally. And I think that's a way that finance can play, because in the end it comes down to credit ratings sometimes. So therefore, our purchasing model is to utilise vendor finance to ease that barrier, to be able to expand this quicker, because there is a lot of capital in the world looking to be deployed. We just need to support it to find a way to access that. So it's very similar to like a mobile phone type, cell phone type of model. But what that does is expands it quicker. And that can only be good for the economy, but it's also good for the world as we transition energy.
Thank you so much, Stuart, for being on the Katalis podcast.
My pleasure. Thanks very much for having me.
That was Stuart Parry chatting with Sondang. I recently caught up with Marlistya Citraningrum, Program Manager for Sustainable Energy Access at the Institute for Essential Services Reform in Jakarta. Well, hello again, Ibu Citra, and thank you so much for joining us on the Katalis podcast. We're thrilled to be featuring you on this episode on renewable energy. And I suppose to start, Indonesia is a huge country, as you well know, and with it, huge demand for energy. The government forecast is already showing an annual growth of electricity demand of 4.9% between 2021 and 2030. Can you start by telling us what's generating this demand and why is it only going to get bigger?
All right. First of all, thank you, Rachel, for having me on this Katalis podcast. It is my pleasure to talk to you about Indonesia's energy landscape. And yes, as an emerging economy, Indonesia is still on the verge of growth, economic development, livelihood, etc. So it is by no reasons that our electricity demand is increasing each year. Although I'm not sure what's the government data used to forecast this electricity demand that you mentioned. However, our deep decarbonization report that we released last year shows that there will be more electrification of transport, electrification of heating industry, and also with the population growth in residential. So it is only makes sense that our demand for electricity will be increasing until what we hope no longer than 2030. We hope to hit our consumption and emission demand by then.
Okay, that's really interesting. And what I hear everyone in the renewable energy space talking about is not just the generation of renewable energy, but storage as well to ensure reliability and security of energy, and hence the drive to attract more investment in battery technology. What are your thoughts on whether the industry is moving in the right direction in this regard?
Okay, so if we talk about renewable energy, and it is usually the case of variable renewable energy, such as wind or solar, every utility company in the world is a little bit anxious on how to integrate this kind of renewable energy into the electricity system. Thus, talking about storage and how to smoothen the integration of variable renewable energy into power system is very important, because then it will answer how we will use the energy that we harvest during daytime, for example, for solar, and use it on the nighttime where the demand usually peaks in Indonesia. We already have our state-owned battery maker enterprises called Indonesia Battery Corporations. It is aimed to jumpstart the battery industry in Indonesia because we realized that we have several minerals to use in the storage technology. It is still at the nascent stage, though, because I think our country's capability to supply battery-grade nickel are still at very much the early stage of production. And when we talk about minerals, it's usually also related to mining. We are very careful to ensure that the mining of minerals is not done in a harmful way. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense if we want to produce clean technology with battery, but on the other side, also harm the environment.
That makes sense. So still plenty of room for growth, clearly, but are you optimistic? When you speak about those trends, is there a lot of cause for optimism about the direction the industry is going in?
I think right now we try to put renewable energy development first and then thinking about storage, including battery, the next. Because right now, if we talk about renewable energy penetration, we're only at like 12-13% of our energy mix, which is very, very low compared to Australia, for example. And we really want to make this work and then thinking about storage, not only battery, but also probably other type of storage, such as pumped hydro energy storage and other technology that might come.
Okay, so building upon that, looking at the policy framework for decarbonisation in Indonesia, what factors will facilitate wider uptake of battery technology amongst businesses?
All right. If we talk about battery, then first thing that comes to my mind is the transportation sector, because we're gearing towards electrifying the transport sector, and it means that more electric vehicles. With electric vehicles, then certainly we need more and more batteries, and we kind of thinking that it will open the battery business in Indonesia. It will be the gate opener for the business, because then we all need a transportation mode, right? Be that public transport or private transportation mode. And with the adoption of two-wheelers or four-wheelers, electric vehicles, then if we can put that battery production in Indonesia, it will certainly become a big business. And we hope to be one of the hubs for storage/battery production in Southeast Asia or even globally.
And Australia has a keen interest in pursuing partnerships in the renewable energy space in Indonesia, which some of our listeners may have heard us talk about in the first episode of this season on the Indos conference. It was certainly a big topic at Indos, was the potential for renewable energy partnerships. This has been reiterated many times between our leaders. From your standpoint, what are some tangible areas for partnerships on renewable energy between Australia and Indonesia?
Australia is one of the countries with the highest adoption of rooftop solar globally. There is this policy framework that allows that to happen in Australia, be that incentive, bulk procurement, and a lot of policy support to make it happen. And Indonesia is trying to do the same, that we want to have more distributed energy, including with solar energy. And I believe that lesson learned, technology transfer, facilitation of financing scheme, or even capacity building can help Indonesia to also follow Australia's steps in making solar more mainstream in the energy landscape. And other than that, Australia has been working a lot on pumped hydro energy storage, because we're talking about storage earlier. So I think it is also relevant to make that one part of the collaboration that might be fostered between Indonesia and Australia, so that the anxiety because of variable renewable energy can be answered using storage technology. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, Australia is one of the world's largest exporter of lithium. And if that number is correct, then in in the future, when Indonesia also wants to build its battery manufacturing industry, then it is important to also have collaboration with Australia on the lithium side.
Yeah, really fascinating insights. Thank you so much, Ibu Citra, for being on the Katalis podcast. It's great to hear from you.
The challenge with renewable energy is in making its variety of resources consistent and dependable to meet customers' needs and optimize economic returns. In a country with such huge and growing demand for energy as Indonesia, but also ambitious goals for zero carbon economy, we'd be fired up to find a solution in large-scale energy storage that checks all the boxes. We're so glad you could join us for this episode of the Katalis podcast. See you next time.